I'm just going to wing it based on the last talk, just to sort of grab a lot of misinformation. I made a couple of notes on my phone while she was talking. I don't know how long you've been doing the whole mobile programming or the whole React Native thing, but 2013, I had to build a mobile app. Right? I had absolutely no idea what the whole native thing was about. I had no idea. I just kind of roughly knew JavaScript, and I Googled the shit out of this project. I genuinely didn't know what I was doing, and Cordova came up, and that was back, honestly, genuinely in like the beginning old days. So it's come a very long way since then, and definitely Ionic is one of the things you want to use. But while we're here and while we're all on the topic of information, there is something that I feel that was missed, and a lot of that, not a lot of that, but the thing that was missed, it's native script. Okay, native script is primarily Angular. That's because it uses TypeScript, right? But it's not exclusive to Angular. You can also use Vue, and what really makes it cool is that in a multi-skill set team, you can have Angular developers, Vue developers, regular JavaScript guys, and even native guys work on the same app. So I mentioned a little earlier where Uber and Airbnb and Facebook have a lot of native components, but they also rely a lot on React Native. So they're sort of in one big container, right? So you can use the native stuff to get a lot of inherent trust to access the device API, such as alarms, vibrating, waking up, all of those things. And you can use the easy things for the JavaScript stuff. I think Uber uses React Native for the maps, and how it draws the map and a lot of other cool things. It's just a lot quicker to develop. So if you're looking into mobile development, obviously Ionic with React Native, but this guy is also a different alternative. And they're all very easy to get going with. They all use command line interfaces. It's basically just generate app, run app, and then you're on your way, right? It's a really cool time to be not just a developer, but I think a web developer, because there's a lot of really cool things you can do. All right, so the title of my talk was something Angular-ish, but we threw some suggestions backwards and forwards. My whole thing was, you've installed Angular, and now what do you do? So I'm gonna use her experience. She just wanted to build an app, and she basically went into, I know React, let me just find out what's going on. My first experience with Angular was in a corporate environment, a bank, and I rocked up on the project and they were already running Angular. I wasn't some sort of Angular expert, I didn't even know what it was, but essentially it changed some HTML, there was some JavaScript involved in there as well. I didn't really get the full grasp of what Angular was or what it does. It took me better part of 4 or 5 years now just to get it together, and I still don't even know half of it, primarily because they keep changing things, but we'll get to that. Okay, it's a really badly pixelated picture, but this is me. This is basically my title. This is what it says on my LinkedIn. I'm the lead Angular developer, and pretty much whatever else needs developing. And a lot of the time, whatever else needs developing is based on which customer complains the most. And I work for them, and the customer that complains the most is the customer that spends the most money with them, okay? It's Rand Merchant Bank. It's the black bank, which is usually the teal bank, basically, yeah. All right, so where's the guy in the blue-green shirt? Where did he go? He's gone around the corner. So he was talking about keeping up and dependency breakings and a lot of that. Angular went through a lot of this shit, a lot of it. It started with Angular 1. It was called Angular.JS. And then pretty much as soon as they launched Angular.JS, I think it was on version 1.3 or 1.4, I'm not quite sure, they dropped the bomb and they were like, React's a lot better. We're going to build Angular the way that React does it. So basically everything you learned in version 1 it's basically different. It's completely different. You might as well go learn React instead of Angular. A lot of people got angry. Not sure why, but anyway, people just accepted it and then they just moved on from there. Then they got to about version 2 point something and then they decided it's not really ready for version 3. We've got some other radical new things. We're just going to go into version 4 straight away. Genuinely no reason why that exists still. Then they jumped to version 5, version 6, 7. I think we're on 8.3 now, right? The biggest differences between 4, 5, and 6 is how the command line interface actually generates your application and eventually how it compiles that thing, right? It used to have a really big bundle size. Now it's a lot smaller. And a lot of those things happen behind the scenes and it's not a lot of input from, so let's say you're in a corporate environment like a bank, Intellect guys, right? You'll go to a bank like RMB. When I was at Intellect, I was at Liberty. It was an Angular project. And basically you were already thrown into this ecosystem. Figure it out, just go with it, right? You honestly have no idea how it's been configured for startup. You don't know how it's been configured to pass messages here and there. You just know that this is the script you need to subscribe to, and that's sort of how to get there, right? So which one is the right for me? You essentially have no choice. When you install Angular, you get the latest Angular, right? You can specify the version, but there's genuinely no need to. The latest one is basically what they're pushing, and it's the flavor of the month, and it's got all the cool stuff. Okay, if you're at a bank, it's most likely Angular version 1, and there's a crap ton of Google results for that. Okay, that was my other point. The reason why the Angular searches are a lot lower, I feel it's a lot easier than React, right? So I thought that was one of the things. But I also did insight searches for South Africa around a certain period of time. And I think I got the same results as OfferZen did. Angular is sort of popular, at least in Google searches. So I don't know what that means, whether or not the guys just don't know what they're doing, or, you know what I mean? It all depends, right? But I've been using Angular since it started, since 2014. And I Google every day, right? Just now I Googled how to loop through items on a list. It's just, yeah. Anyway, so what exactly is Angular? These are the sort of the key points on the website. It's dynamic, right? So you don't have to post and change. You can view your changes on the same page. Ajax helps a lot with that. It's rich, right? So it's feature rich, and there's a lot of things that are happening at exactly the same time. You can have graphs, you can have timers, you can have constant updates. So basically Angular is really, really good for dashboards, where you're displaying a lot of data, a lot of real-time data. And it's relatively fast in terms of the way that it computes that data. And it's also fast in terms of how quickly you can get going, right? This was a joke, but the pizza was already gone. All right. I have braces, and I just got them adjusted this week, so it's really difficult to make sounds now. So if you can't hear what I'm saying, hand up, and then I'll stop and I'll explain. Okay. So what makes Angular really cool? And this is now post Angular 6. Okay, so we did a lot of hands up. Do any of you guys actually use Angular on like a production level sort of thing, right? Is it latest or really? At which client?
Discovery.
No shit. Okay, cool. All right, so cool. So is anyone here looking to get into Angular? What do you guys know? No one's React. No, of course, yeah. But okay, cool. All right. So what's really cool are the latest couple of versions of Angular. There's a thing called Angular Elements. What an Angular element allows you to do is create Angular application, right? And then you package it as an element. Okay, I'll show you how to do that just now. And you can package that element as an NPM library or pretty much as any sort of distributable file or any code base. You can check it in. And then you can have any other developer on any project, whether it's just plain web, React Native or anything, and they can just import it. They don't need to have Angular running. The use case for an Angular element are quite limited and minimal. There's no reason why you would want to do that unless you don't really want your own overheads of creating a database call or a web server stuff or whatever. If you just want one single dynamic component, that's why you would use that. On another thing, libraries. So libraries, basically, you can use that as an NPM package. It's an NPM package, right? You can create an NPM package. What the difference is between... So the difference between the two here, and so you create the Angular app the same way. But when you package them as a library and as an element, you don't get all that other Angular overhead that makes Angular work. All that other plumbing, bootstrapping, all that other nonsense. It's literally the bare minimums just to get this thing going. So if you're creating a component like a button and you want to standardize across all your applications, you would create a library, you'd check that in, and you'd have other guys install that library throughout their projects. Then there's Angular CDK. Now, CDK is essentially Angular material. So it's the material design language. But it takes away all of the design, essentially. So it's a black and white, it's a coloring book, essentially, for what Angular material is. And you can add your own colors, you can add your own styling, things like that. Because with Angular material, I think you're limited to using their sort of superset of colors, and it's a pain in the butt to overwrite that. So with CDK, you can have the application behave how Angular material does. The little floating buttons, the shadows, the things like that, right? But you can overwrite the styling, and you can add a little bit of your own flavor in there. Okay? I thought there were two of these. Okay. All right. So a lot of the time when you Google tutorials or when you're looking to build something new, I actually don't know what it's called. Decision paralysis. What is it called? Analysis paralysis. Okay. And you just don't really know where to start. I deal with a lot of Java developers in my environment. And I did a sort of a quick little brown bag session at lunch the one day, and they were like, this is cool, man, but what actually happens in the app? Where does the app start? Because he's looking for a private void main somewhere in the middle, right, to launch everything. Yeah. And I was like, what do you mean, where does it? It just starts. I mean, it's there. And he was like, no, bro, where does it? And then eventually I figured him out, and I was like, oh, shit. Okay, I know where it is, right? It just starts. Right? So a lot of people don't understand that. And I feel that if you just break or if you let them experience the penny drop of just how simple and how easy this stuff is, then it changes. It makes it more accessible. The more accessible something is, the easier it is for you to pick it up. right? It applies to everything. Don't want to be sexist, but Tinder has made dating a lot more accessible, right? It's probably hooked up a whole lot more people that wouldn't have hooked up before Tinder was around, right? Uber has made getting around more accessible, right? So any technology, React Native, Angular, whatever you want, as long as you show people that it is accessible and that it's relatively easy, they will get into it. Okay, so the core commands of Angular, and I think all command line interfaces do the same thing. So it's ng for Angular, right? New will launch your new application. This will download all the plumbing. Build will build your new application. Serve will serve it as a local host so you can test out your stuff. Generate generates a whole bunch of things for you. So they've removed a lot of thinking that you have to do. They've removed a lot of brain power that you really need to get going, okay? What they've also done, which is really, really cool, is they've added test. So it's very easy for you to set up unit tests and it will run through the, I don't write tests. I'm a terrible developer, but acceptance tests, that's it, right? And then ng-lint will run through your code, ignore the thanks. ng-lint will run through the code and make sure that it's basically automated code reviews, but we'll jump into that just now. So essentially what I want to do I'm going to do a demo, but I'll do the demo on my laptop. I've got enough space. We'll see how it goes. Okay. All right. No, I've got enough space. I should have, right? I should have. Storage, shit, just about 15 gigs. Okay. We'll be okay. npm, yeah? Yeah. Node modules, yeah. npmi, and we'll do that. All right. So essentially, what we want to do is we want to start Angular, but we want to install it, right? I think it's... Don't tell me how to live my life. Yeah. Should I just do this, maybe? Like that, maybe? A little bigger? Let's try it. Yeah, is it good? Okay. Okay, I haven't installed Angular in a while. Is it npmi Angular? / CLI. Okay, so that's the actual install to get it going. If the internet works. Cool. So it's going to run through this. You need, I wouldn't really say you need a solid internet line, but I've noticed, I'm not quite sure about you guys, but I've worked on a lot of different operating systems, and I found the Unix systems to be a lot quicker with npm related tasks. I'm not quite sure why, but that's why, right? Okay, so we've got Angular installed. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hit ng-new. And with this guy, he now starts asking us a whole bunch of questions that didn't really exist before version 6. So we're just going to say Jozi.JS, right? Okay. So Angular is a single page application. In that sort of description means that it doesn't really go anywhere, that application. It's contained within itself, okay? What Angular routing does is it sort of not pretends, but it does internal routing so that you still get the page changes, right? These are different components, and you can have, but we'll explain it just now. And you can do a lot of things on different pages. So which style sheet format would you like to use? Right, does everybody know the difference between different style sheets things, right? Everybody's under control with that? Do you want me to explain it? Explain it, don't explain it? Don't. Explain it. All right, so a preprocessor, it's basically, it compiles the CSS compiles either the SAS, SAS or less into a cascading style sheet. Why you would use SAS and less is you can create mixins, which are type of methods, functions, right? You can pass parameters, you can create functions, commonly repeated tasks like specific browser targeting, specific media queries, shadows, themes, colors, things like that. You could create reusable methods, right? And then have that, that eventually compiles into one CSS file, right? And it writes it out into 1 billion lines, eventually, if that's what you want. But it won't be 1 billion lines up in the front, right? It's primarily for code reusability and sharing, right, amongst other developers on the team and the project. It's very cool. It's 2019, it's 2020 almost. You should definitely be using a preprocessor at this point if you're a web developer, ideally. Or wherever you're working, they should be using it, right? Okay. If they're not, it's very easy to get going, right? It's not that hard. It will compile to a CSS file. Okay, so you can include it in your project, and a lot of the base JavaScript projects, it's very difficult to get SAS going because you do need a task runner like Gulp or a Grunt, and those guys are notoriously difficult to get going the first time because you need a compiler like a Java. Java is a compiled language. C# is a compiled language. It eventually compiles to a WAR file. It compiles to a DLL. So essentially you're compiling an SCSS into a CSS. The browser won't know what a SCSS is. Is the internet down? Nope. Shoot. Resources in terms of your laptop? Not really, actually. Depends on how big your application gets. Of course, if you have 1 million sort of lines of SCSS, it will eventually, but all of that is compiled on build time, right? It's ahead of time compilation. So by the time it lands in your browser, there's nothing to compile. It's there, right? It's part of that main.js, bundle.js, right? So it's all bundled together. So this is basically what it does in the beginning. And you will see, I think Mike made a joke, install Node. So there's 19,000 packages. Yeah, so I'm probably down a gig already, right? Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's basically, if you have a graveyard of side projects on your computers, like you do with your domains, Angular is very resource heavy in terms of how it uses or how it downloads that stuff. Is it LL? Okay. So we've gone into our application, and that's where it is. This is literally the biggest problem of them all, but thankfully that doesn't get deployed anywhere. And that's it. This is our app. This essentially is a website. So if we want, we should be able to do that. And eventually it'll do it. Eventually, once it wakes up, there we go, it'll jump a couple of percent. All right. There we go. Okay. I'll explain what that says now, but yeah. Right. And a lot nicer looking than that React Native stuff as well, right? I mean, it's got some style sheets, right? It's got some style sheets. It's looking really cool. I mean, right? It's got links to learn other things. And then it gives you sort of what do you want to do with your app, right? New component, Angular material, add a dependency, build for production, do cool shit, right? And then it gives you the very first thing you should be doing, and that's generating something. Right? You can generate components, services, libraries, generate anything, right? All right. So I'm going to keep talking until they chase me out. All right. I'm kidding. I'll be another 10 minutes, promise. So essentially what's happened here, you asked about all the bundling and the stuff, right? So if you can see this, right? It compiles everything initially once, right, into this gigantic 4 meg thing, right? And 4 meg over a shitty connection is quite a big deal, right? But what's cool about this, and we touched on PWAs. No. I just want to show you guys something. So I'm going to turn off my Wi-Fi. Okay. So Twitter championed. Oh, fuck. Guys, I'm sorry. Embarrassing. Sorry, I can't show you this, but I'll show you it anyway. If you watch really, really quickly, Twitter is a PWA, okay? So is m.uber.com. It will load. Here's the PWA, and then here's the rest of the app, right? So it basically loads the shell there, and then there's the rest, right? It's fucking cool, right? It's really, really incredible, right? You're seeing the page and it's there. A couple of years ago, Facebook pioneered the whole ghost. Yes.
Open up DevTools. Go to the application tab and click the offline tick box.
So I gets paid more money than me. Application.
Go to Service Worker. Left-hand side. Tick the tick box that says offline.
Okay, here's your PWA, right? It knows who I am already, so it's probably stored that in the sort of the local cache. And here it is, literally everything. It's Twitter. There it is. It's on your browser, but you don't have an internet. And that's what's really cool about PWAs. And it's such a pity that Apple won't let them live because they're going to cannibalize the App Store revenue. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, business. Unfortunately, capitalism. And here it is, right? There's your stuff, and it loads. And that's it. So that's what's really, really cool about PWAs. I take you through to Uber, but we're going to sit for a very long time on this and why the internet is really, really cool. Okay, so it bundles a lot of this stuff for you, okay? And it minimizes a lot of the stuff that you are going to come on. Okay. Jozi.JS. All right. So here is it doesn't do it on yeah. So bizarre, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to show you something. Okay, so when you're ready to build your application, you'll see it'll run through everything. It'll compile your modules into one big file, right? And then you should have a distribution folder that pops up any second now. Hopefully, it's not that big. There it is. Okay, there's your distribution folder. And here is your website. Okay, so essentially once you've built it, you just drag all of that stuff into whatever hosting provider you've got, and there's your app, there's your website, right? Everything that's included in it, everything that makes it cool, that's it. All right.
How big is that at the moment? It looks very small. 700K?
Yeah, so it's tiny. I mean, hold on, I'm going to do it here. $74K, 741 kilobytes.
Before you've written a single line of code.
100%.
741 kilobytes before you've
Yeah.
even written hello world.
Yeah.
But the hello world won't make much of a difference, would it?
Yeah, but it's a cool Hello World. It comes with its own favicon. It's got a lot of cool stuff. Now we can do some really cool things with it, right? So we're going to open. No. All right. Okay, here's our guy. He's on the left. So I'm going to quickly run through exactly what on earth is going on here so that you know what's happening. Okay. Your index is where it all happens, where it all begins. Except nothing really happens there, so you should never go to index. It's basically where everything ends up compiling. Okay, your very, very first point of entry is your app component, which is the default component that gets created, which essentially is your index, right? And there it is. This is that weird funky text. If we go back, here's our weird funky text. If we take it back and we do that and we just say weird funky text. I'm not serving. Okay. It will update eventually. Will it reload? Okay, weird funky text. So that's where we are. So what I'm going to do here quickly is just I'm going to open up a new thing. All right, so the very first thing Angular told us to do was ng generate. Okay, so we're going to generate a component quickly. Just to show you just how relatively simple. So you can use G for generate, and then we'll say component, and then test component. So what this will do, it will create the actual base of what our page looks like, right? So we've got the style sheets at the top. We've got the actual HTML that's being displayed, the template. The spec.ts is for your tests, and the actual component.ts is your controller, the actual brains of the components. Okay? and here's our guy, right? Test component works. And then this is where essentially all the magic happens, right? I think React does a template, and then you put the HTML, make it bigger. Shoot.
I just noticed, like, when I started with this whole generation thing, sometimes it doesn't wire up your component to the module you think it will. And I noticed it's because where you are, where you actually run generate from, it'll actually wire it up to the nearest parent module.
Yes. Yes.
And that's something that I couldn't understand for the life of me, but eventually figured out. Just thought everyone should know.
No one really understands, man. It's some sort of default thing, right? So if we move our test component to a folder called components, and here we are, we're in our app. So now if we want to go ngg component and then another, it will pop it in just outside of components, right? There's another. But if we went ngg components inside, okay, so now what it's done, it's popped it inside, right? Essentially, you can do that, right? You can provide the paths to that. I think maybe the coolest thing about actual development is I usually group all my stuff into components, services, things like that. I want to generate a service quickly for you just so you can see. But everyone here uses Visual Studio Code. Oh my God. Okay. Start using Visual Studio Code, right? It's really, really cool. Because check this out. What's really cool about TypeScript in general is there's an extension. It's not a TypeScript extension. It's a Visual Studio extension. If you want, this is what I do, and this is what I force everybody that works sort of in my team, right, to do. There's a thing called Barrel, right? And what Barrel does is it exports your TypeScript classes into one file. All right, so now if we had to go to app module, and I'll just sort of move this away, right? We've got app component and then test component, right? So what we can do is we can move this guy, right? And then instead of app component, we can just go to components. Okay, and the reason why it's complaining is because our app component isn't I gotta do it one at a time, but I'll show you now, and then we'll pop in another, and then we'll run this guy again. Okay. Okay, there's our guys, right? So eventually when you build your really, really big application, once you get going in terms of routing and stuff like that, it'll be a pain in the butt, right, to get all of this stuff going. So it's very easy just to stick things into components, to stick things into a services folder, but it all depends on what the culture fits, right? And then another really cool thing about Angular is services, right? Services are Angular's answer to dependency injection. So if you have data or common methods, I usually stick them in a service. So if there's a lot of the guys prefer the that single responsibility thing, right? I fail all my coding interviews, but that single responsibility, whatever, that shit, right? When you create stuff, right? I actually wonder why they hired me at Intellect. I completely bombed my interview, and I was like, really, what? Yeah, you know, I'm joining tomorrow. What a lot of guys do is, if you want to present things like cars or anything, they will create a cars service which loads data specifically for cars. I do it a little bit differently, and I create a data service. And I have all the gets and the posts and whatever. Maybe that's a bad thing. Maybe it's a good thing. But essentially, that's kind of how I do it. Don't save. And then if we go to our service, where is it? Yeah.
So it depends on the customer whether to store every call.
There's a right way and there's a wrong way.
That's the right way.
My way is the wrong way. Okay.
So you should have a service for each component.
Essentially, you genuinely should have something that's related to the thing that it's working for. So if you're fetching cars, you should have it with a cars component. And it should have a cars service, right? You shouldn't have a generic service where you call all sorts of methods. I sort of started developing way before coding standards existed. It was basically like, cool, I feel like doing it today. And it's just a learned behavior, right? I definitely advocate the new way. It's a lot better because then people that are working on simultaneous the project that you're working on, there's chances that you don't mess up what they're working on, right? And if you break one component file or one service, you won't break the entire application, right? So my way is definitely the wrong way. It's just a learned behavior that I've had for a while. Okay, I'm going to show you guys something else quickly. All right. I'm not sure if any of you guys do it or whatever, but I find that interviewing for different companies helps me keep in touch with the trends that are happening out there, right? You don't have to feel bad about interviewing with other companies, right? You're not cheating on anybody. You're literally just going out there to see what's out there. A lot of people use that, right? A lot of people use that to get a bigger paycheck, right? This company offered me this much money, you should match. I don't ever do that. I do openly accept interviews, and a lot of the coding interviews that they give you, it's almost always specific to either the industry that they're in or the environment that they're in. And you can learn a lot about a company culture with the type of tests that they give you, right? I'm an Angular developer, so you would assume I know moderate JavaScript. I got given a JavaScript test by a local company. I bombed it. I got 3%. 3%. The guy calls me back. He's like, listen, man, I don't know what to tell you. And I was like, it's cool, man. Like, right? I don't know what to tell you. Clearly, I'm doing my job because I'm employed. But, right? So there is a company in Amsterdam called Backbase. They're a fintech. And they asked me to interview. So basically what they wanted is to illustrate Angular skills, fetching data from an API, and doing some cool stuff in terms of UI bits here and there. All right, so they wanted to know, pick 5 cities in Europe and load the weather API and do something cool with it, right? Show us what you can do. So I picked the 5 most populous cities, and then I ran the temperature. And one of the cool things is that I ran a chart, and then what's actually happening in Berlin over the next 5 days, right? So it's a pretty cold place to be. Anyway, this is more of a indication of, this took a day. It took me a day. It took me a Saturday to build this, right? And it's not that crazy, okay? So I'm going to show you guys exactly what's going on here. Right, so we've got the default stuff, nothing really exciting happening here. Inside the app, right, I've got components, models, routes, and services. You see I did that one services thing, right? So just a quick touch on routes, and then we'll kill it. Yeah, okay. So routing in Angular, we spoke about it earlier. This defines how you want your application to route internally. Where this is the benefit is you're not reloading the same page every time, right? But you're not moving away and out of the application. Okay, so if you see here we are in region Europe, but if we went back, you would see that the region changes and then the route changes, and then the entire sort of top navigation changes as well, right? And then there we go, right? So pretty much what is the whole point of this talk, right, is that you can build something relatively quickly in a day that showcases a lot of things like fetching data, applying things like Bootstrap, right, and a bit of colors, some images. You can make a very rich interactive application with not a lot of effort. You don't need a lot of skill, right? This isn't difficult. You just need to sort of apply yourself, and you need to kind of visualize the end goal. So in terms of a new side project that you guys want to do, and in terms of a new what would you call it? A new technology you want to learn. If you've heard about Angular, if somebody's talking shit about Angular, and you want to be like, I want to know why this person's talking shit about Angular, install it, run it, and do some cool stuff with it, right? And then you should also do something cool with React and build an app, right? You'll never know what you don't like until you try the things that you don't like, right? Yeah? You know what I mean, right? Like, I hate, what do you call it? Fucking... I don't hate React. I actually don't mind React at all. I'll never use it. What do I hate, man? I don't know. Artichokes, right? But I don't have a...
That thing.
Yeah, I don't have a blind hatred for artichokes because, you know, it's just something. I have a blind hatred for artichokes because they taste terrible. But I tried them, right? I tried it, they taste shit. Never again, right? It's not for me. I'm done, right? So try something cool. But if you're looking to just build a website, don't use a framework, right? You don't need a meg of JavaScript to display some cool stuff, right? Don't do it. Thanks, guys.